Knitting Daily has been sponsored in part by Interweave, your craft community for books, magazines, videos, patterns, events, and more. On the web at interweavestore.com.
So let's get started with some advanced increases. Of course, for your top-down sweaters, you're going to need to make your increases along your raglan shoulder lines, which would just run from the base of your neck all the way out to the bottoms of your arms. And you can use your standard increases, you can do whatever kind of increases you like, but sometimes it's nice to have in your arsenal a few kind of more sophisticated increases that sort of use fabric in different ways. So this first increase that I've got here, you can see in my swatch that I've started with a very narrow width, and I've been increasing on every other right side row or every 4 total rows. On either side is sort of a median line, and you can see that I'm growing out very naturally from that center line. And this is really an almost invisible increase. It seems as though those new stitches are just sort of growing out of that center stitch. How do you make this? Well, what I'm going to do is first I'm going to make a stitch that increases, it's a right-facing increase, or the right slanting increase. Okay, and to do this, I'm going to knit my stitch as usual. I'm not going to drop my yarn, however. What I'm going to do instead is I'm just going to go all the way into the stitch on the row below. And the way that you can see that is it's not the loop that my running yarn is pulled out of, it's actually the loop just below that. So I'm going to go below, and I'm going to grab a loop of yarn and pull it through. So I've got 2 stitches that grew out of this 1 stitch here. Now I'm going to make a stitch with the increased stitch on the right side of the stitch, so it's a left-leaning increase. In order to do that, I'll just reverse the order of the steps. I'm going to knit into the row below first, pull through, and then just knit into the stitch on top. And so I've got 4 stitches now where there were 2. And the really intriguing thing about this increase is that you can work it right next to another increase of the same type. You don't need to have a stitch in between to kind of take up the slack or to anchor them, as with any kind of yarn over increase or any increase that uses the bar between 2 stitches. So again, I'll show you that right leaning increase is to knit the stitch and then knit into the loop below and drop it off. The left-leaning increase is to knit into the row below first and then knit the stitch on top. And this is a very, I think of this as a sort of an upscale increase or an advanced increase. It's very subtle and very clean. Another increase that falls into this category for me is what's often called a lifted increase, or the knit one below increase. And it sort of is in the same spirit as the last increase, but it's just a little bit more refined. Again, I'm not working with a middle column of stitches. I'm just working with the 2 center stitches, increasing off either one of those. And let me lay this flat for you first so that you can see just how subtle these increases really are. The fabric is growing all along the center here, obviously, but you can really hardly see where they begin and where they end. So we're going to make our right leaning increase first. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually pick up the stitch, pick up the left leg of the loop 2 rows below the stitch that's actually on my needle. So here's how to count that. This is the stitch that's on my needle. This is the stitch of the row below, these 2 legs here. And then this is the stitch of the row below that. And we'll talk about that in a second, but I'm going to pick up the left loop of that just by sticking my left-hand needle up from the bottom through it. It's on my left-hand needle, and now I'm going to just knit it. I didn't twist it, I didn't do anything with it, I just knitted it as though it were a regular stitch. Now to make my left-leaning increase, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the right leg of the loop just below. So here's the loop that's on my needle, on my left-hand needle. Now I'm just going to take the right leg of the loop below, and I'm going to slide it over to my left-hand needle without twisting it or manipulating it in any other way. I'm going to knit it, and then knit my stitch as normal. And you can see there that here's a new stitch, and right here is a new stitch. Those just seemingly grow out of nowhere. Why do we pick up on one row below for for one increase and for 2 rows below for the other one? Well, the reason is because, you know, when we're making that second increase, we're picking up the right leg of the row below, and then we're knitting the stitch. When we make the increase that picks up the left leg, obviously we've already knitted the stitch that loop is going to be picked up off of, you know, sort of that column of stitches. So we've already knitted this stitch. And if we picked up this loop and we pulled a loop through, all we'd end up with is just a yarn over, sort of wrapped around twice, because there's no kind of anchor for it. It would be the equivalent of if we tried to pick up the loop of the leg of the loop that's on the needle now. So we've already knitted the stitch, so we're going to go 2 rows below and knit into that to make our increases. And these are both really subtle, sort of beautiful increases that you can use along raglan shoulder lines. Just for a basic primer real quick on some of your more standard increases, the make one increases are still good options for raglan increases. They are very subtle. Their only problem is that you can't work them right next to each other because they tend to take up too much slack. So for make one increases, we're always looking at the bar of yarn that's running between the stitch on the right needle and the loop on the left needle. I'm going to pick it up just by inserting my right needle into it, and I'm going to put it on to my left needle, sort of oriented knitwise. So the front loop is on it, the right leg is on the front, and the left leg is in the back. Now I'm going to knit into the back of the stitch, which twists it as I knit. And when you knit on, you can see that that is just a nice subtle little increase. The opposite of that is to pick up that loop and then orient it backwards onto your needle so that the left leg is in front, and then knit into the front of it as normal. So there are some really fun new increases to take you on your top-down knitting adventures.